Lieutenant Commander Mark Rains had seen more than his fair share of soldiers come and go. Over 20 years in the Navy SEALs had hardened him into a man of cold instincts and sharper judgment. His men trusted him because he didn't take risks with untested recruits, and he had little patience for what he called paper heroes, those who looked good in reports but failed when bullets started flying. So when Sergeant Elena Torres walked into the dimly lit operations room at Coronado, duffel bag over her shoulder and a sniper's case in hand, Rains barely lifted his eyes from the thick stack of mission files on the table. "Another transfer," he muttered under his breath, flipping a page. "We don't need dead weight right now." The room buzzed faintly with conversation as the other operators, men forged through deployments in Afghanistan, Iraq, and countless Black Ops, gave her the once-over. Some smirked. Some whispered. A few chuckled. They were used to replacement's tough men, scarred, tattooed, carrying themselves with a swagger that told their story before words did. But this? A woman, compact in frame, calm in expression, walking into the heart of their fraternity. It wasn't what they expected. Elena didn't flinch. She'd heard it all before. The skepticism, the sideways glances, the dismissive laughter. That followed her in every unit she'd trained with. Her silence was her armor. She walked to the corner, dropped her bag, and carefully unlatched the case that held her weapon. A Macmillan TAC 50, modified, polished, maintained like an extension of her own soul. Her hands moved with practiced precision, wipe the barrel, check the scope alignment, oil the bolt, run her finger lightly along the trigger assembly. Every detail mattered. Every movement was part of a ritual she had learned not from manuals, but from years on the wide, wind-battered plains of Montana, where her father had first put a rifle in her hands. "Patience is your weapon," he used to say, standing behind her as she squinted through a scope at targets pinned against fence posts a mile away. Anyone can pull a trigger. Not everyone can wait for the earth to breathe with them. That memory was her comfort as laughter rippled through the room. "Hey, Torres," one of the men, Petty Officer Jensen, called out with a grin. "You gonna knit us sweaters when it gets cold out there?" The room erupted. Elena ignored him. Her focus remained on the rifle. Commander Rains finally set down his file and looked at her directly for the first time. His face was hard, weathered, his hair streaked with gray. His voice carried authority without effort. "You're here because Washington thinks we need another eye on this mission," he said flatly. "But let's get something straight. In this team, we don't have room for anyone who slows us down. You want to prove yourself? Fine. But if you break, if you hesitate, men die. That's the only truth that matters." Elena met his gaze, steady and calm. "Understood, Commander." He studied her for a long moment, as though waiting for a flinch, a break in her composure. None came. With a grunt, he turned back to his files. The briefing began. Rains projected satellite imagery onto the wall, the grainy black and white photos showing a sprawling desert complex. "Intelligence confirms that a rogue faction has secured a nuclear warhead, mobile launcher. They're preparing it for deployment within days. Our job is to infiltrate, confirm, and neutralize." The room grew serious. The joking ended. Every operator leaned forward, eyes on the images. "Approach will be under cover of darkness," Rains continued. "Demolitions team plants charges. Sniper support covers insertion and exfil. Once the warhead is disabled, we extract immediately. Timeline is tight. Intel suggests international consequences if we fail." He turned, scanning the room, his eyes passing quickly over Elena. "Questions?" For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then Elena raised her hand. Rains arched an eyebrow, clearly annoyed. "Torres?" "Sir," she said calmly. If the launcher becomes active, infiltration may be impossible. A long-range neutralization of the commander or ignition system could prevent launch without full engagement. The room broke into chuckles again. Someone muttered, "What is this? A carnival trick?" Another added, "Maybe she wants to shoot the nuke out of the sky." Rains held up a hand, silencing them, though his smirk showed he shared their doubt. "This isn't theory, Sergeant. This is war. We don't gamble millions of lives on miracle shots." Elena lowered her hand. "Understood, sir." But inside, her thoughts were clear. If the time comes, I'll make that shot. The meeting ended with tension lingering like smoke. Operators filed out, already discussing loadouts and breaching plans. Rain stayed behind, marking coordinates, ignoring the quiet figure still seated at the back. Elena finished reassembling her rifle, packed it away, and stood. Outside, the California night air was cool, the faint roar of surf rolling in the distance. The men gathered at the barracks, joking, trading stories, loosening the weight of the mission with humor. Alana sat apart, cross-legged in the shadows, laying out cleaning kits, dismantling her weapon again. Her fingers moved with the slow rhythm of someone who trusted ritual more than companionship. The team's laughter echoed across the courtyard. She heard snatches talk of beers, of old firefights, of scars they compared like trophies. For a moment, she felt the sting of isolation. But then she reminded herself, she wasn't here to belong. She was here to be precise. Later, as the base settled into restless sleep, Rains walked the grounds, his thoughts heavy. He paused when he saw her, still at her weapon. He didn't speak, just watched. The way she moved methodical, almost reverent. There was no bravado. In her, no swagger, only focus. He left without a word. In her mind, Helena whispered the words that had carried her through every trial, every sneer, every dismissal. One day, they'll believe. She had no idea how soon that day would come. The operations room at Naval Base Coronado was alive with tension. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating rows of men hunched over tables, laptops flickering with satellite imagery, drone feeds, and tactical schematics. The smell of coffee and metal lingered in the air. Rains, standing at the head of the room, laid out the plan with military precision. Every step, every contingency, every probability was accounted for, or so he believed. "Listen carefully," he began, voice low and commanding, echoing slightly off the bare walls. "We have intel that a rogue faction has acquired a mobile nuclear warhead. They plan to deploy it within 72 hours. Our mission: infiltrate, disable, exfiltrate. Minimal casualties, maximum effect." The operators leaned in, eyes scanning. The satellite imagery projected onto the wall. The desert complex sprawled across the screen like a living organism. Watchtowers, barbed wire fences, vehicle garages, and the central command hub. Drones had captured small glimpses of men moving. Heavy equipment under the desert sun. The intelligence report, detailed and grim, suggested the rogue commander was methodical and dangerous, someone who had trained his soldiers to kill without hesitation. Rains clicked to the next slide. The layout zoomed closer to the heart of the compound. The mobile launcher, its trailer parked in a reinforced garage, engines warmed for transport. "This is where it gets tricky," he said. "If the launcher is moved even a few kilometers, infiltration will be near impossible. Demolition teams may not reach it in time. That's where snipers come in covering angles, eliminating threats, giving the team a chance to complete objectives." He paused, eyes scanning the room. "Any questions?" A few hands lifted hesitantly, operators asking about terrain, wind conditions, extraction points. Then, as if by instinct, Elena raised hers, Rain's head snapped toward her, surprise flickering across his face. "Yes, Sergeant Torres?" Elena's voice was calm, precise, measured. "Sir, if the warhead is activated before we can reach it, infiltration may fail entirely. A long-range strike, targeting the ignition system, or even the rogue commander could neutralize the threat without full engagement. It's high risk, but possible." The room erupted in laughter. Petty Officer Jensen leaned back in his chair, smirking. "You want to shoot a nuke out of the sky? That's a new one." Other men chuckled, exchanging glances. "She's serious?" whispered a corporal beside him. Rains, however, kept his face neutral, though his eyebrow arched slightly. "This isn't a shooting gallery, Sergeant. We don't gamble millions of lives on miracle shots. Ever." Elena held his gaze. "Understood, sir." The laughter faded. Some operators whispered behind closed hands, but Elena ignored them. She didn't need validation. She didn't crave it. Every mission she had ever survived, every impossible shot she had made in Montana or in classified exercises, had been done in silence, in solitude. She had learned early that proving herself was not a matter of words. It was a matter of results. Rains moved on, continuing the briefing. He outlined insertion points, paths of least detection, guard rotations, and the likely positions of enemy sharpshooters. He emphasized speed and precision, repeating the mantra he had drilled into his men for years. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Mistakes cost lives. While he spoke, Alana's mind was already calculating. Angles, wind vectors, elevation changes, distance. She ran the numbers silently, visualizing the shot she might have to take. 7,000 meters. Impossible to most, routine to her. She remembered her father's voice. The earth isn't flat. The wind isn't constant. The shot isn't just a bullet. It's timing, patience, physics, and instinct. Trust your calculations, but trust yourself more. The operators, meanwhile, began discussing equipment. Suppressors, scopes, calibers, and ammo types filled the shang room with a constant hum of professional debate. Jensen joked about bringing a laser-guided bazooka. Others laughed, shaking their heads at the absurdity. Elena merely observed, storing details in her mind, visualizing her own gear. A Macmillan TAC-50 modified for extreme distances. The rounds hand-selected for consistency. The bipod adjusted for uneven sand dunes. The scope calibrated with a level of precision that made engineers proud. Rains continued, oblivious to the small stir she was causing among a few of the more perceptive operators. The success of this mission relies on one factor above all: discipline. You follow orders. You trust your team. You survive. A junior officer asked about contingency plans for drone detection. Rain's reply was blunt. No plan survives contact with the enemy. Adapt or die. Alana's eyes narrowed slightly. She had adapted to more than that. She had survived scenarios most of these men could only read about in briefings. The desert wind whipping across Montana, snowstorms, nights spent in solitary observation. Each of those moments had prepared her for something like this. As the briefing wound down, Rains assigned teams. Explosives and breaching operators grouped together. Communications specialists handled comm channels, and the sniper teams were split across vantage points. Elena was assigned to the distance overwatch position, though she knew the true potential of her skills far exceeded what they assumed. The room began to empty, operators murmuring and exchanging equipment checklists. Jensen clapped Elena on the shoulder with a smirk. "Don't shoot us in training, all right?" She didn't respond. Her focus remained inward. In a world full of noise, she had learned to find silence. In that silence, she could see every movement, predict every angle, calculate every trajectory. Her skill was invisible to those who judged only by size, age, or gender. Later, as the room cleared and the lights dimmed, Rains lingered, reviewing the mission data. He glanced toward Elena, who was cleaning her rifle methodically. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. There was something about the way she handled the weapon, the way she prepared, that unsettled him. A seed of doubt crept in. What if she could actually do what he deemed impossible? Elena, unaware of his observation, whispered a silent mantra. One day, they'll believe. She had repeated those words every night of training, every mission, every impossible scenario she had faced. And now, for the first time, she felt the weight of that truth pressing down not as arrogance, but as responsibility. She visualized the desert in her mind, the satellite imagery overlaid with every variable she could control. Wind, heat, mirage, rotation of the earth, distance, gravity. Every calculation, every adjustment, every microsecond mattered. The success of the mission, and the lives of millions, could depend on a single trigger pull. The night passed slowly. Operators checked gear, ran drills, and strategized quietly, the hum of generators the only soundtrack. Elena continued her preparations, cross-checking her equipment, examining every round, adjusting her scope, reviewing contingencies. She imagined every possible scenario, the warhead in motion, the guards patrolling the perimeter, the commander in the ignition room. Each image sharpened her focus rather than inducing fear. Hours later, when the base finally quieted, Elena stepped outside. The night air was cool, heavy with the scent of salt from the nearby Pacific. She stared out at the darkness, stretching toward the horizon, the faint glimmer of distant city lights far beyond. In that vast silence, she could imagine herself alone. On the ridge, rifle leveled, world suspended in anticipation. She knew the men at Coronado doubted her. She knew Rains didn't believe. But doubts were irrelevant. She had trained for this, waited for this, imagined it countless times. She had survived impossible odds before. And soon, the world would demand her impossible. Elena reassembled her rifle one final time, each movement deliberate, precise, ritualistic. She checked the scope, adjusted the bipod, verified ammunition, and packed everything back into the case. Her heart was steady, her breath measured. There was no fear, no hesitation, only preparation, focus, and determination. Back in the barracks, operators slept fitfully, unaware that among them was someone who might alter history. Rains reviewed his plans, unconsciously glancing at the shadows where Elena had stood. For the first time, he felt a faint, uncomfortable thought. Perhaps he had underestimated her. Elena lay on her cot, eyes open, mind racing with scenarios, calculations, and contingencies. The weight of what might come pressed down, but she welcomed it. She had faced fear before. She had survived scrutiny and dismissal. And she would survive the impossible. Somewhere far away, a warhead waited. Somewhere, the lives of millions hung in balance. And somewhere, Sergeant Elena Torres whispered to herself, steady as a metronome, one day they'll believe. The sun would rise soon. The desert would awaken. And in the coming hours, her moment would arrive. The sun had barely crested the horizon when the team assembled at the remote training range. The air was dry and crisp, carrying a faint scent of gunpowder and earth. Rains stood at the head of the formation, clipboard in hand, scanning his operators with practiced scrutiny. They were his eyes in the field, his soldiers who had proven themselves under fire. Every move mattered. Every lapse could cost lives. Elena Torres was already kneeling at her assigned station, rifle in hand. The Macmillan TAC-50 gleamed under the early light, meticulously cleaned and calibrated. She had adjusted the scope the night before, noting wind conditions, barometric pressure, and mirage patterns, all variables others might overlook. Her patience was unwavering, a quiet contrast to the chatter of the other seals setting up their positions. Rains began the drill. "Long-range engagement test," he announced, voice cutting through the morning chill. Targets placed at 2,000 meters, 3,500 meters, and 4,000 meters. Wind conditions simulated. Terrain undulating. Standard issue rounds only. Time limit 30 minutes. The operators grumbled quietly. Long-range shots were notoriously difficult, even for seasoned snipers. The margin of error at 4,000 meters was infinitesimal fractions of a degree, could send a bullet hundreds of feet off target. Elena didn't flinch. She adjusted her bipod on the uneven sand, testing the stability of the rifle, her finger lightly, brushing the trigger as she calculated every variable in her mind. Wind drift, Coriolis effect, humidity, air density. Each factor was layered into her mental equation, a formula she had memorized after countless hours on Montana's plains. The first operator fired. The shot echoed across the desert, and the target swayed slightly, but it was a miss. Frustrated, he muttered under his breath, adjusting his scope. The second operator tried. Another miss. And then the third. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the line. Elena's turn came. She raised the rifle, her movements fluid and practiced, the weight of the weapon a familiar presence against her shoulder. The first target, 2,000 meters, blinked into her crosshairs. She exhaled slowly, aligning her shot with the mental calculations she had made. The rifle discharged, a sharp crack tearing through the air. The target toppled. A few operators nodded in approval, though some exchanged skeptical glances. They didn't yet understand her precision. The second target, 3,500 meters, loomed farther. Elena adjusted for wind drift, small shifts in elevation, and the distant shimmer of heat off the desert sand. She fired. Another clean hit. Whispers began to circulate. Finally, the third target, 4,000 meters near the upper limit of the standard. Exercise. Other operators had failed, muttering about the impossibility of the shot. Elena's heartbeat remained steady, her focus unbroken. She calculated the angle, factoring in not just the physical conditions, but the rhythm of her own breathing, the subtle pulse of the earth beneath her. The rifle cracked. The target fell with perfect precision. A stunned silence enveloped the range. Rain's eyes narrowed. He had expected competence, yes, but not this. Impossible, he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. Yet the numbers were undeniable. She had done what no other operator in the room could accomplish. Petty Officer Jensen, usually quick with a sarcastic remark, merely stared, mouth slightly open. Did she just? Elena reloaded, calmly checking the rounds, her demeanor unchanged. She didn't gloat. She never did. Results were their own reward, and the mission ahead would demand far more than applause. The drill continued with moving targets, simulated obstructions, and timed shots. Elena's performance remained flawless. Each shot was calculated, executed with patience and precision. Others struggled under the pressure, adrenaline making their hands shake, their breathing erratic. Elena thrived in the quiet of concentration, a calm before the storm. As the morning progressed, Rains watched from the observation platform. Arms crossed. A rare sense of unease gnawed at him. He had dismissed her when she arrived, assuming that her reputation as a female sniper in a male-dominated unit was more hype than substance. But here she was, exceeding every expectation, every limitation he had assumed. He turned to a fellow commander. She's better than anyone I've ever seen at this range, he admitted quietly, almost unwillingly. And that's a problem. Because if she can do this with a static target, Imagine what she can do in the field. Meanwhile, Elena packed away her rifle, carefully inspecting every component, ensuring nothing was out of place. She had internalized the lesson that preparation was as critical as execution. One misalignment, one oversight, and even the perfect shot could fail. The operators gathered for a debrief, voices filled with awe and grudging respect. Some still whispered, reluctant to fully acknowledge her skill. Others, more perceptive, approached quietly, asking technical questions about her technique. Elena answered with patience, but without vanity. She didn't need to prove herself to the doubters. Her actions spoke louder than words. Later, Rains called Elena aside. They stood at the edge of the range, the morning sun painting the desert gold. "Sergeant Torres," he said, his tone measured, "you've clearly demonstrated skill beyond any expectation. But understand this skill alone doesn't win battles. Discipline, timing, coordination with the team, that's what keeps people alive." "I understand, sir," Elena replied, steady and unflinching. "I've trained for both. Skill is useless without discipline. I won't compromise either." He studied her for a long moment, trying to reconcile his prejudice with the undeniable evidence of her ability. "I dismissed you before," he admitted, voice low. "Perhaps I was wrong. But understand this. I don't forgive mistakes. One misstep, and it could cost lives. Mine, yours, everyone's." Elena nodded. "I don't intend to make mistakes, Commander. But when the time comes, I will do what others cannot." Rains didn't reply. He simply turned and walked back to the observation platform, leaving her in silence. He was cautious now, wary of underestimating her again, yet unwilling to openly admit the extent of her talent. The afternoon brought new drills moving targets over varied terrain, low light, simulations, and rapid engagement exercises. Elena excelled in all. Her precision, focus, and mental fortitude were unmatched. The other operators began to accept her as a peer, though some did so silently, wary of showing admiration too openly. Respect had to be earned in the SEALs, and she had earned it not through words, but through results. By evening, the team gathered around a small campfire, exhaustion etched into every face. Elena sat slightly apart, tending to her gear, cleaning her rifle again. She listened to the other operators swap stories of combat, past missions, and near-death experiences. She didn't join their laughter, but she understood it. It was their way of surviving, of keeping morale intact. Rains observed her quietly, from a distance, noting the calm determination that seemed to radiate from her. For the first time, he realized that this woman, this solitary sniper, might hold the key to the mission's success. The thought was uncomfortable. He was used to controlling every variable, relying on his judgment, his experience. Elena introduced a variable he could not predict, a combination of skill, intuition, and patience that defied conventional expectations. Night fell over the training range, casting long shadows across the desert. The operators retired to the barracks, their conversations softening into murmurs, sleepiness overtaking their competitive energy. Elena remained at her station for a while, checking her equipment, reviewing calculations, and mentally rehearsing scenarios. Her discipline was relentless, a reflection of years of preparation, countless hours spent alone, perfecting her craft. She thought of Montana's vast plains, the early mornings with frost underfoot, the endless horizon that had once been her training ground. Each target she had faced there, each challenge, had prepared her for this moment, though she did not yet fully understand the scale of what lay ahead. Somewhere far beyond the base, the rogue faction was moving their nuclear asset closer to deployment. The intelligence suggested days were slipping by. For Elena, the countdown was no longer abstract. The world's fate might very well depend on what she could achieve at impossible distances. She whispered to herself again, a quiet affirmation. One day, they'll believe. And this time, she knew that day was approaching faster than anyone realized. The desert was alive with heat and shadow as the SEAL team prepared to move. The sun had begun its slow climb, painting the dunes in shades of gold and ochre, but the temperature did nothing to soften the tension in the squad. Rains stood at the edge of the formation, scanning the horizon through polarized sunglasses, his face set in stone. Every second counted. The intelligence had been clear. The rogue faction had positioned the nuclear warhead on a mobile launcher in a heavily guarded compound. Time was running out, and failure wasn't an option. Elena Torres adjusted her rifle case on her back, feeling the familiar weight against her shoulders. The Macmillan TAC-50 had been stripped down for mobility, but she had refused to compromise precision. Every piece of the weapon had been double-checked, every round accounted for. The desert stretched before her, infinite and undulating, but she was ready. The wind was mild but unpredictable, gusting in uneven currents that could send a bullet off target. She had accounted for this in her calculations, but the margin for error was minuscule. Rains motioned for the team to advance. They moved in tight formation, each operator aware of the other's position, weapons ready, senses alert. The soft crunch of sand underfoot was nearly silent, but in the vast openness of the desert, even the smallest sound could carry. Elena stayed at the rear, scanning, calculating, observing. She could feel the pulse of the environment, the way the dunes shifted with the wind, the way heat shimmered along the horizon, the faint traces of movement she might exploit for cover. Hours passed as the team crept toward the compound. Drones provided intermittent visual confirmation, but their feeds were delayed and imperfect. Each dune climbed and fell like a small wave, and every shadow had to be questioned. The SEALs moved with the silent precision they had been drilled into, but Elena's eyes were already looking beyond their formation, seeing angles, anticipating threats. At a distant ridge, she spotted them first. 2 patrols moving along the perimeter, rifles slung over their shoulders but alert, scanning for intrusion. She measured the distance. Over 1,000 meters, the perfect opportunity for initial overwatch. Her fingers brushed the rifle lightly, testing its balance, aligning. Her mental grid. She whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "Patience is the weapon. One shot, one chance." Rains stopped the formation abruptly. He had spotted movement, to a glimmer of a guard, checking the perimeter. He gestured sharply, signaling the team to drop low. They melted into the sand, bodies pressed against the terrain, breathing shallow, silent. Elena remained prone, scope trained on the patrol, every muscle relaxed but ready. The guards were cautious, moving deliberately, unaware that someone was already watching, calculating, waiting. Elena adjusted for a slight crosswind, factoring in the desert's variable gusts. Her trigger finger hovered, synchronized with her heartbeat. She had rehearsed this scenario countless times in her mind. The rifle discharged once a clean shot. The first guard collapsed silently into the sand. The second froze, confused, then bolted back toward the compound. The team moved again, advancing cautiously. Rains shot a glance at Elena, an unspoken acknowledgement of her effectiveness. He still did not fully trust her, but he could no longer deny her results. Every shot she took, every calculation she executed, saved them time and reduced risk. As they approached the edge of the compound, the terrain became more treacherous. Rocky outcroppings and shallow canyons forced them to move single file. Elena scouted ahead with her binoculars, marking every potential line of sight, every enemy position. She noticed subtle signs: footprints in soft sand, disturbed gravel, the glint of a patrol rifle catching the sunlight. She whispered directions to the team through hand signals and comms, guiding them through paths that minimized exposure. Suddenly, gunfire erupted from the far side of the compound. The team froze instinctively. Rains barked commands, and the operators returned fire, taking cover behind dunes and rocky outcroppings. Smoke began rising in the distance. It was a trap and ambush designed to slow their progress. Elena didn't panic. She tracked movement, identifying enemy positions. Invisible to the naked eye. One shot, carefully calculated, neutralized a guard aiming for the demolitions team. Another shot covered an operator crossing an exposed stretch of sand. Her presence turned the tide instantly, her rifle acting as both shield and sword. Rains, bleeding slightly from a grazing wound, ducked behind a dune, shouting over comms. Elena, watch the southeast flank. They're trying to cut us off. She adjusted quickly, the rifle shifting in her hands with practiced ease. A pair of guards approached the ridge, unaware of her presence. She fired twice too precise fatal shots. They collapsed silently, the desert absorbing their fall. The squad advanced, tension mounting. The mobile launcher was visible now, parked in its reinforced garage, engines warming. Guards patrolled its perimeter methodically. Any misstep, any hesitation, could set off disaster. The SEALs began planting explosives at strategic points, but the enemy was alert, responding with precision. Elena remained on a distant ridge. Surveying, the shot would soon be impossible. The commander could arm the warhead in moments. She adjusted her calculations, factoring the exact distance over 7,000 meters. The wind was subtle, yet present. Mirage effects would distort visual clarity. She knew every variable had to be accounted for in the instant she took the shot. Rains, she spoke softly into comms. I have visual on the ignition system. If they arm it before we reach the charges, it may be too late. I can neutralize the target from here. There was silence on the other end. The commander's voice was tight, cautious. Do it. But make it count. One shot. The squad moved into final positions. Demolition teams set charges near the base of the launcher, while cover teams engaged remaining guards. Elena adjusted her scope, aligning the crosshairs with the target. She measured the distance meticulously, factoring in the Coriolis effect, the variable wind, and the slight rise in elevation. Every microsecond mattered. Time slowed. Her heartbeat aligned with her mental rhythm. She exhaled, feeling the rifle settle perfectly against her shoulder. This was what she had trained for. Years of preparation, countless hours alone in the jungle wilderness, perfecting every possible calculation. It all led to this moment. The commander began arming the warhead. The seconds stretched impossibly long. Elena's finger hovered, ready. One miscalculation, one lapse, and the consequences were unthinkable. She visualized the path of the bullet across 7 kilometers of desert, a single thread holding the fate of millions. Then she pressed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The bullet screamed across the sand, tracing an invisible line toward the target. The enemy commander collapsed, the ignition system untouched, and the warhead remained inert. A stunned silence fell over the battlefield. Guards froze. SEALs advanced, morale restored by the sniper's precision. Demolition teams planted charges and detonated them, destroying the mobile launcher before extraction. Rains stared at the ridge where Elena lay, motionless but ready. For the first time, he felt awe replacing doubt. She had not just supported the mission, she had dictated its success. Every calculation, every shot, every moment of preparation had turned the tide. The team exfiltrated under the cover of darkness, adrenaline surging, exhaustion mixed with relief. The desert was quiet again, as if nothing had happened, but history had shifted in silence. Elena disassembled her rifle, meticulous as ever. The mission was far from over, but she had proven her skill in the most extreme circumstances. Rains, bleeding and tired, walked past her silently, a rare nod of acknowledgement, the only words he offered. For Elena, there was no triumph yet. Only the knowledge that preparation, patience, and precision could rewrite impossible odds. Somewhere far away, intelligence analysts would later confirm the success. But she remained grounded, already calculating, already preparing for what came next. The desert stretched endlessly, a silent witness to an impossible shot, to courage unseen, to the quiet hero who had just changed the course of events. The desert night was darker than expected, a heavy black curtain punctuated only by the faint glimmer of stars. The wind had shifted subtly, carrying the scent of sand and diesel from the rogue faction's compound. Elena Torres lay prone on a ridge several kilometers away, her Macmillan TAC-50 leveled, bipod firmly planted, eyes through the scope calculating every detail. Every breath, every heartbeat, synchronized with the rhythm of the rifle. This was no longer a drill. Every calculation mattered. The lives of millions depended on her precision. The mobile launcher hummed in the compound below. Guards moved in careful rotations, unaware of the invisible figure observing them from the desert ridges. The rogue commander was visible through the open hatch, inspecting the warhead's ignition system. Intelligence reports had underestimated his speed. He was preparing to launch within minutes, and the SEAL team's breaching and demolition squads were still securing charges on the perimeter. Rains crouched behind a dune, comms in hand, whispering to his team. "Elena, confirm your position? Wind conditions?" "Calm," she replied softly, though her calculations suggested minor variations at different elevations. "Adjusting. For a slight left drift at 7,000 meters. Wait for the target to stabilize." The operators around Rains exchanged nervous glances. No one could see the distant sniper. No one could anticipate what she might attempt. They trusted her silently. But the thought of a 7-kilometer shot was almost mythic. Elena shifted slightly, aligning the crosshairs with the ignition panel of the warhead. She took into account every environmental variable: wind gusts, temperature gradients, the curvature of the earth, even mirage distortions from the desert. Heat. She exhaled slowly, the only sound the faint click of the scope adjusting. The rogue commander bent over the ignition, unaware of the invisible bullet already on its trajectory. Elena calculated the exact moment, the distance, the delay, the drop. 7,000 meters. One chance. Suddenly, a guard moved unexpectedly, stepping between her and the target. Elena froze. She could adjust, but any hesitation could cost the shot. She waited, counting the seconds in rhythm with the wind's pulse, aligning her sights for the briefest window of opportunity. "Now," she whispered. The rifle cracked, the bullet leaving the barrel with a muted roar thanks to the suppressor. The projectile flew across the desert night, invisible but precise, a single thread of fate connecting the sniper and the target. The ignition system sparked, but the rogue commander never reached the switch. He collapsed instantly, struck cleanly through the panel that would have triggered nuclear catastrophe. Guards froze, bewildered, then scrambled for cover. The warhead remained inert. Rains exhaled sharply, his eyes wide. "She did it?" he muttered, almost incredulous. Around him, operators stared toward the ridge, though they could see nothing, realizing the scale of what had just occurred. Elena didn't celebrate. She didn't smile. Her rifle remained leveled, her mind already calculating contingencies. She had executed her mission flawlessly, but there was more to be done. "Charges set?" she asked over comms. Rains responded. voice taut with tension. Half in place. We're moving to the extraction point. Enemy reinforcements approaching. The desert erupted. Alarms blared from the compound. Guards poured out from the remaining structures. Weapons raised. As SEALs engaged, suppressive fire cutting a path for the demolition team to finalize the charges. Explosions shook the earth, sending plumes of sand into the night air. Elena's scope captured every movement. She tracked potential threats, neutralizing them when operators were exposed, each shot calculated with surgical precision. The wind shifted again. Her target became obscured momentarily by rising dust. She adjusted, firing 2 more rounds to eliminate guards attempting to flank the squad. Her breathing remained controlled, heart steady, movements deliberate. Every shot was life or death. Any miscalculation could unravel the mission. "Commander, extraction point secure?" she asked. Rain's voice was terse, almost clipped. "Almost. Hold your position. Don't engage unless necessary. Time is critical." Elena observed silently. A group of guards attempted to flank the ridge. She didn't hesitate. One by one, her shots took them down. The desert echoed with suppressed gunfire, punctuated by the occasional explosion from demolition charges. The team's path became clear, though danger still lurked. Minutes stretched into eternity. The warhead remained inert. The rogue commander was neutralized. The team moved methodically toward the extraction point, but sniper coverage was still essential. Elena remained at her vantage, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. She noticed subtle movement on the horizon, a small vehicle approaching. The ridge from the east, likely enemy reinforcements attempting to intercept. She calculated the trajectory instantly, adjusted for distance, elevation, wind. Her finger pressed lightly against the trigger. One shot, one life, one moment that could decide the outcome. The shot rang out, precise, unerring. The vehicle's engine exploded, sending sand and metal into the air. Any hope of pursuit vanished. Rains let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "God damn," he whispered. Elena didn't respond. She disassembled her rifle, partially scanning for additional threats. The team reached the extraction point, moving under the cover of her fire. Helicopter blades kicked up sand, lifting them from the desert floor. Operators climbed aboard, Rains last, glancing toward the ridge where Elena had been. She joined them quietly, the weight of the mission still pressing against her. The helicopter lifted off, the desert shrinking beneath them. They were safe for now. The warhead was neutralized. Millions of lives had been spared. Rains finally spoke, voice heavy with both relief and awe. "Sergeant Torres, you just did what no one else could have done. That shot. Impossible. Absolutely impossible." Elena met his gaze, calm, collected, unshaken. "It wasn't impossible, sir. It was calculated. Preparation matters more than luck." He nodded, swallowing hard. For the first time, he admitted it silently to himself. He had underestimated her. Her talent, patience, and focus had not only saved the mission, they had prevented a global catastrophe. The team debriefed on the helicopter, the adrenaline, slowly giving way to exhaustion. Operators praised each other, recounting moments of tension and precise teamwork. Elena listened, offering technical input only when necessary. She didn't seek accolades. She never did. Her satisfaction came from knowing the mission had succeeded, from knowing her preparation had mattered. Night gave way to dawn as they approached base. The desert stretched endlessly below, silent and serene, as if nothing had happened. Yet the events that had just transpired would echo far beyond the sands. Intelligence analysts would later confirm that a nuclear launch had been thwarted, that a sniper's single shot had changed the course of history. Rains finally approached her, alone in the hangar. His voice was low, almost reverent. "You've saved millions tonight. I misjudged you. Completely." Elena inclined her head, expression neutral. "I did what was necessary. That's all any of us can do in moments like this." He studied her, conflicted. Part of him wanted to celebrate, to acknowledge her skill openly. But another part, the part forged by years of rigid hierarchy and skepticism, hesitated. "You're extraordinary, Sergeant. Don't forget that. But extraordinary has its price. Expect that going forward." She nodded silently, understanding perfectly. She had lived with skepticism her entire career. Recognition was fleeting. The mission, the responsibility, and the calculation, that was all that mattered. As the sun rose, painting the hangar in pale gold, Elena Torres walked quietly through the base, rifle now stored, mission complete, but vigilance unbroken. She had faced the impossible and prevailed. The world remained unaware of how close it had come to catastrophe, but she didn't need recognition. She had proven, in the most consequential way imaginable, that preparation, precision, and patience could save millions of lives. The world would never know her name. But history had been altered by a single sniper, a calculated shot, and the unyielding resolve of a woman who refused to fail. The helicopter blades sliced through the dawn air, lifting the SEAL team away from the desert floor. Sand and dust swirled below in chaotic clouds, sunlight reflecting off golden grains. For the first time since the mission began, the operators could breathe not freely, but with a fraction of relief. Adrenaline still coursed through their veins, but for now, the most immediate danger had passed. Elena sat quietly in the rear of the helicopter, rifle stored, but still close at hand. She had executed the impossible, stopped a nuclear launch, and neutralized the rogue commander, but her mind refused to settle. She reviewed every shot in her head, every micro-adjustment, every split-second calculation. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders, as tangible as the rifle she had carried across the desert. Rains, seated near the cockpit, rubbed his face tiredly, the faint bruises from shrapnel and a grazing bullet still fresh. He kept glancing at Elena, a mix of awe and disbelief in his expression. For years, he had led missions, commanded men who had faced impossible odds, but nothing like this. The precision, the composure, the mental discipline she had exhibited, it defied everything he had believed about human capability. The rest of the team began debriefing amongst themselves. Voices overlapped in rapid chatter, recounting moments of tension, near misses, and flawless execution. Petty Officer Jensen shook his head, still incredulous. "I don't care what anyone says. She's a damn legend." Others nodded, silently acknowledging her skill without words. Elena listened, offering tactical insights only when necessary. She didn't need accolades. What mattered was the mission, the calculations, the lives saved. Recognition was irrelevant. The stakes had always been higher than applause. Suddenly, a minor alarm beeped from the helicopter's comm system. Rain's eyes narrowed. "Report," he barked. The pilot's voice was strained. "Engine 1 overheating. We'll need to reroute to the nearest forward operating base. Extraction ETA, 30 minutes delayed." The helicopter's slight tremor sent sand falling in minute motes through the air vents. Operators braced themselves. The desert had been treacherous enough, but now they faced mechanical risk. Elena adjusted herself, scanning the horizon for any potential threats. Even now, danger lingered. Extraction wasn't guaranteed. Survival demanded vigilance until the very last second. As the helicopter limped forward, the team prepared for the possibility of an emergency landing. Rains issued rapid commands. Secure all gear, Prepare for hasty egress. Keep formation tight. Elena double-checked her equipment. Her rifle was stowed, but she kept her tactical knife accessible. She was ready for every contingency. Below, the desert sprawled in endless waves of sand and jagged rock. The rogue faction's remaining operatives, scattered and leaderless, had little chance to regroup, but Elena remained alert. She knew the desert offered endless hiding places, and the enemy was unpredictable. One wrong step could still result in ambush. Minutes stretched like hours. Sweat slicked her brow despite the cool morning air. Her eyes scanned every ridge, every shadow, every glimmer that might signal movement. Her team relied on her vigilance, though no one knew just how. Crucial her situational awareness had been to the mission's success. Finally, the helicopter touched down at the forward operating base, skimming over the rugged landing zone. Operators disembarked quickly, scanning for potential threats, while ensuring all mission-critical equipment remained secure. Elena moved last, methodical, her gaze sweeping the horizon. She noted disturbed sand, tire tracks, and distant heat signatures. Every observation mattered, even after the mission was complete. Inside the base, debriefing began immediately. Intelligence officers pored over satellite imagery, mission logs, and drone footage. The rogue commander's elimination and the neutralization of the warhead were confirmed. Analysts muttered under their breath, astonished at the improbability of a sniper executing such a feat from 7 kilometers away. Rains approached Elena, his expression unreadable. "Sergeant Torres," he began, voice low, "walk with me." She followed silently through the base corridors, past technicians and operatives, until they reached a secluded observation room. The hum of generators filled the air. Rains turned to her. "You didn't just save this team tonight. You saved millions of lives. Do you realize that?" Elena's expression remained calm, neutral. "I do, sir. But numbers mean nothing if we fail next time. One mission does not define preparedness." He sighed, a mixture of exhaustion and reverence. "You're extraordinary. I misjudged you from the start. Your precision, your patience. I've seen many good snipers in my career, but nothing like this." She inclined her head slightly. "Thank you, sir. But extraordinary is not enough. Preparation and calculation save lives, not reputation." Rains let the words linger. He had spent his life commanding men, relying on experience and instinct, but Elena had shown him that skill, rigor, and calm composure could surpass even the most seasoned operator's intuition. Meanwhile, in another section of the base, the operators cleaned and maintained their gear. Petty Officer Jensen approached Elena cautiously, a hint of a grin on his face. I still can't believe what you did out there. 7,000 meters. That's insane." Elena gave him a small nod. "Distance is irrelevant when you account for variables. Practice and calculation make the impossible possible." Jensen shook his head in disbelief. I can't imagine doing that. You're something else, Torres." She offered no reply beyond a brief acknowledgement. Praise was fleeting. Responsibility was enduring. She knew that while this mission had ended, vigilance would always be necessary. Hours later, the SEAL team gathered in the mess hall. Exhaustion etched every face, but laughter and muted celebration had begun to seep through the tension. Stories of the night's firefights, the precision shots, and near misses circulated. Elena remained at the edge, observing quietly. She engaged minimally, offering tactical corrections or insights only, when it mattered. As night deepened over the base, she finally found a quiet corner. She opened her field notebook, reviewing calculations, environmental data, and shot logs. Every shot fired tonight was recorded meticulously: distance, wind, angle, elevation, and result. For Elena, Knowledge was power. Preparation was safety. She studied each moment, replayed every movement, and silently assessed what could have been done differently, what could have improved. Rains entered quietly, standing at the doorway. "Still working?" he asked, voice soft, almost hesitant. Elena didn't look up immediately. "One cannot prepare for everything, sir, but one can always learn from what was executed." He approached slowly, studying her focused expression. "I have no doubt about your skill, Torres. But do you ever stop?" She finally looked up, her eyes calm, unwavering. "Stopping is not an option when lives are at stake. Resting is. But vigilance is permanent." Rains let her words sink in. For all his experience, all his command, he understood the truth of what she said. Some responsibilities could never be left behind. Some burdens never lifted. Later, in the barracks, operators slept fitfully. Elena remained. Awake for a while, scanning news feeds, military communications, and satellite logs for any ripple effects from the mission. Even after neutralizing the rogue commander and the warhead, threats remained. She had saved millions tonight, but tomorrow, new dangers would emerge. Her thoughts drifted briefly to Montana, to the solitude of her early training grounds. There, she had learned patience, calculation, and observation skills that now carried global weight. The desert, the compound, the impossible shot. All were extensions of years of preparation, discipline, and resolve. By the early hours, she finally allowed herself a moment of rest. Yet even in sleep, her mind mapped scenarios, calculated angles, and rehearsed contingencies. A sniper's work never truly ended. History had been altered tonight, but the future demanded readiness. Rains watched from the doorway, quietly acknowledging the depth of her commitment. He had underestimated her, doubted her, dismissed her, but no longer. She had proven, beyond question, that skill, discipline, and focus could alter the course of events, even against odds that seemed insurmountable. Elena slept lightly, the weight of responsibility still pressing upon her. Her rifle rested within reach, ready for the next challenge. The world remained unaware of how close it had come to annihilation, but she remembered. She calculated. She prepared. She was ready. The desert, the warhead, the impossible shot. All were behind her now. Yet the vigilance remained. She had done the unimaginable, saved countless lives, and yet her work was far from over. The morning light streamed through the tall windows of the Pentagon briefing room, cutting across polished wood and the glint of metallic insignias. Elena Torres sat silently at the end of the conference table, her uniform crisp, her expression calm but watchful. She was surrounded by high-ranking officers, intelligence analysts, and a few civilian officials, all eager to dissect the night's events. The mission's success had prevented global catastrophe, but success brought scrutiny, and scrutiny often brought politics. Rain stood beside her, a protective figure in a sea of doubt and curiosity. He had spent the last few hours recounting every step of the mission in private briefings, emphasizing Elena's critical role. Now in this room, she would have to answer questions not just about execution, but about protocol, judgment, and the optics of a woman single-handedly neutralizing a nuclear threat. The chief intelligence officer began, voice measured but insistent. "Sergeant Torres, your actions during the operation were extraordinary. A shot from 7 kilometers is unprecedented. Explain your decision-making process and how you determined the precise timing and trajectory." Elena adjusted slightly, hands folded neatly in front of her. "Sir, my calculations accounted for distance, wind drift, atmospheric conditions, and elevation. I synchronized with the SEAL team's movements and observed target behavior to select the exact moment for engagement. It was a combination of preparation, observation, and execution. Timing was critical. A senior general leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed. And the risk assessment? Were you aware of the possibility of collateral damage or operational failure? Yes, sir. Elena replied evenly. Every variable was considered. The potential consequences of failure were catastrophic, but risk assessment and mitigation guided my decisions. A goal was precise neutralization of the threat, with minimal exposure to team members and civilians. Murmurs rippled through the room. Some officers were impressed, others skeptical. A few questioned the reliance on a single operator for a decision of global consequence. Rains, sensing the tension, interjected. General, with all due respect, the calculations are precise. Sergeant Torres executed flawlessly. The risk was minimized by skill, not luck. Her action prevented nuclear escalation. The general's eyes narrowed, studying Elena. I understand, but the optics. A single operator making this choice without direct oversight from command. Is this protocol? Elena remained calm. Sir, in extreme situations, rigid protocol can be adjusted in real time. The chain of command supported the mission's strategic objectives. My actions aligned with mission parameters and intelligence guidance. Another officer chimed in, a hint of incredulity in his voice. And the distance 7 kilometers? No conventional sniper training accounts for that range. Are we to believe this was achieved under standard operational parameters? Rains shot. A sharp look. This operator is exceptional. Skill, preparation, and discipline allowed this outcome. You can question protocol, but not the result. Elena's composure never wavered. Sir, the shot was calculated using environmental modeling, scope adjustments, and extensive practice. While unconventional, the outcome aligns with operational objectives. As the briefing continued, Elena noticed a subtle shift in the room. Analysts and officers began to whisper among themselves, some nodding, some exchanging astonished glances. Her performance had already left its mark, but perception was still being formed. The discussion moved to political implications. Civilian officials were concerned about media exposure, global reaction, and potential diplomatic fallout. Questions veered toward secrecy, attribution, and recognition. One analyst leaned forward, a tablet in hand. Sergeant Torres, how should this operation be communicated to the public? What level of disclosure is appropriate? Elena paused, then replied carefully. The operation's strategic objective is paramount. Public acknowledgement should focus on the mission's success and prevention of nuclear escalation. Individual recognition is secondary. Operational security is critical. Some officers nodded. Others frowned. It was clear that her approach, practical, disciplined, and devoid of self-interest, clashed with bureaucratic expectations of heroism and visibility. After the debrief, Elena was escorted to a quieter hallway. Rains followed, observing as she reviewed notes and diagrams, cross-referencing satellite feeds and trajectory calculations. She was already thinking about contingencies, potential threats, and post-mission security measures. You're still working, Rains said quietly. Preparation never ends, sir, she replied. The threat may be neutralized for now, but the systems, the actors, they evolve. Rains shook his head in disbelief. I've commanded teams for 20 years. I've never seen focus like this. You executed the impossible, Torres. And yet you act as though the mission isn't finished. Elena's gaze was steady. The mission may have succeeded, sir, but vigilance is continuous. One mistake, one oversight, and failure returns. Word began to circulate in classified channels. Reports highlighted the success, but struggled to convey the full scope of Elena's contribution without breaching operational security. Her name became known among military analysts, sparking debate. Extraordinary skill or extraordinary luck? Could a single operator, even with the best training, truly control events of this magnitude? In a private office, Rains confronted a bureaucratic reality. They want to minimize your role publicly. They're concerned about precedent, optics, chain of command, but they can't ignore the mission's success. It's a political tightrope. Elena leaned against the wall, arms folded. I understand. Recognition is irrelevant. Accuracy, discipline, and results are what matter. If the world never knows my name, it does not diminish the outcome. He studied her, conflicted. Part of him wanted the world to acknowledge her genius. Another part respected her humility and focus. You're extraordinary, Torres. Don't let them convince you otherwise. But be aware, they may question every decision, every calculation. The days that followed were filled with interrogations, classified briefings, and controlled media exposure. The story was sanitized. SEAL Team Operation Prevents Nuclear Launch. No mention of the extraordinary sniper behind it. Analysts and officers privately marveled at the execution, but public recognition was intentionally vague. Elena continued. Her routine training, analysis, equipment maintenance, while political machinery churned around her. She rarely spoke to reporters, avoiding interviews, and instead focused on data, simulations, and tactical review. She observed patterns, recalculated trajectories, and ensured every team member's performance was logged and evaluated. Rains visited her daily, offering updates on briefings and strategic decisions. You're the most discussed operative in the Pentagon, he said one morning, his voice quiet, almost incredulous. But everyone struggles to put it into words. They don't know how to handle the magnitude of what you did. Elena didn't respond immediately. History will record results, sir. Interpretation may vary, but the outcome is factual. Millions of lives were saved. That is what matters. Even among her peers, reactions varied. Some operators quietly acknowledged her skill with nods or respectful glances. Others remained skeptical, dismissing her as a product of extraordinary circumstances rather than mastery. But Elena didn't seek validation. Her mission had been successful, her calculations correct, and the world safe for now. Weeks later, the team reunited briefly for a debriefing and morale assessment. Operators shared personal reflections. Petty Officer Jensen approached Elena, voice low. I still can't believe you did that. 7 kilometers. Nobody would even attempt it. She offered a small nod. It was calculated. Luck is unreliable. Skill and preparation matter. Even Rains, hardened by decades of command, admitted privately that she had redefined his understanding of capability. A single operative, disciplined and precise, had altered the trajectory of global events. The recognition might be controlled, but he would never forget. Elena returned to Montana briefly, reconnecting with the vast plains that had trained her mind and body. She practiced her craft in solitude, each shot a reminder of preparation, focus, and the discipline that had saved millions. Even away from the battlefield, she remained vigilant, knowing the mission's consequences extended far beyond one night. In the corridors of power, discussions continued. Analysts debated attribution and operational security. Bureaucrats argued over wording and recognition. Yet Elena remained unaffected. She measured her satisfaction not by accolades or headlines, but by results. She had executed the impossible, neutralized a nuclear threat, and returned without error. The world may never fully know her contribution, but that fact mattered little to her. As the sun rose over Montana's plains, Elena adjusted her scope, observing distant targets, reviewing calculations, and preparing silently. She had faced unimaginable odds and succeeded. The mission had ended, but the work of vigilance, of precision, and of responsibility never ceased. And somewhere, far away, the world slept safely, unaware of the sniper who had changed history with a single calculated shot. The days after the mission flowed slowly, almost artificially, as the world continued unaware of how close it had come to disaster. Elena Torres returned to Montana, to the quiet hills and endless plains that had forged her skills long before. The seals had recognized them. The mountains were still, the air crisp, and the only sounds were the wind brushing through the tall grasses and the occasional distant call of a hawk. She walked along the ridge where she had trained as a young sniper, rifle in hand, inspecting her surroundings with precision. Every slope, every ridge, every shadow mattered. The environment was her constant, a companion in preparation, a teacher. In patience, she fired rounds into distant targets, her calculations perfect, each shot a reaffirmation of the discipline that had saved millions. Back at the Pentagon, the political and intelligence ramifications of the operation continued to ripple. Analysts debated and reported internally on the rogue commander's demise and the neutralized nuclear threat. Official communications downplayed the personal role of any single operator, focusing instead on team coordination and procedural success. Few understood the scale of Elena's contribution, and fewer still would ever know. Rains, however, understood. He had witnessed it firsthand. The calm composure, the meticulous calculations, the impossible shot. He had seen her neutralize guards at impossible ranges, control the battlefield from a ridge miles away, and prevent a catastrophe that could have changed history. He made a point of briefing key personnel privately, ensuring that her name, though not publicized, would be recorded accurately in official military archives. Even within her own team, respect for Elena grew silently. Petty Officer Jensen approached her one evening at base. "I still can't believe it," he said quietly. "That shot, it was legendary." Elena offered a faint nod. "It was preparation. Luck plays no part in precision. Skill does." The rest of the team acknowledged her expertise without overt fanfare. Among warriors, respect often spoke louder than accolades, and Elena had earned the highest of honors, unquestioned trust in the field. Yet, despite recognition from her peers, Elena's life remained largely unchanged externally. She continued her training, honing skills that few would ever understand. Every shot she fired, every calculation she ran, reinforced the discipline that had defined her career. Personal glory was irrelevant. Her satisfaction was measured by precision and the unseen impact of her actions. She spent hours reviewing the night of the mission, not in pride, but in analysis. Each decision was re-examined, each trajectory recalculated, each environmental factor revisited. She cataloged every element of that night, preparing for future scenarios where her skill might again prevent catastrophe. Rains visited her quietly in Montana one afternoon. He had taken leave from official duties to speak with her in private. "You've done more than I can express," he said, his voice low. "I've commanded men through countless operations, but never witnessed precision and composure like yours." Elena looked out over the horizon, expression calm. "Sir, the mission's success was a result of preparation and timing. Composure was necessary. Lives depended on it." He studied her, a mixture of awe and something like disbelief in his eyes. "And yet, they'll never know. Most of the world will never hear name. Not like they should." Elena finally turned toward him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile brushing her lips. "The world doesn't need to know. They only need the result." Rains exhaled, absorbing the weight of her words. For the first time, he understood fully the essence of her skill, not just the rifle, not just the calculations, but the mental discipline to operate above ego, above recognition, above fear. Weeks later, military analysts and historians would quietly review the mission, documenting the event in classified archives. When the reports were eventually declassified, the operation would be referenced as a coordinated SEAL success with minimal attribution to individuals. Yet in those quiet files, in those detailed logs, Elena Torres' name would appear, her calculated shots recorded with precision, a silent testament to her unmatched skill. Back in Montana, she continued her solitary routine. She observed wildlife, measured distances, calculated trajectories. She knew her training had not only saved lives, but had become part of a broader mission to protect the world, often without acknowledgement. The sniper's path was one of solitude, focus, and the quiet impact of perfect execution. One evening, Rains returned unexpectedly, bringing a package, a standard military commendation, unsigned for public recognition, but including private. Notes from the highest ranks acknowledging her skill and courage. He handed it to her silently. Elena studied it carefully. "Acknowledgement is unnecessary, sir," she said softly. "It is deserved," Rains replied firmly. "Even if the world never sees it, you saved millions. That alone is enough." She nodded, pocketing the certificate. It was symbolic, not for ego, but for record. The world remained unaware, but history, even if silently, had been altered because of her. As the sun set over Montana, casting long shadows across the plains, Elena aimed her rifle at a distant marker. She exhaled, adjusted for wind, elevation, mirage, and executed the shot. The target fell precisely where she intended. Another silent demonstration of skill, another affirmation of discipline. She stood slowly, rifle at her side, surveying the vast landscape. The night would bring more training, more calculations, more preparation. A sniper's work was never truly complete. The world remained oblivious to the nuclear threat narrowly avoided, yet Elena Torres knew the truth. Her single calculated shot had altered the course of history, a legacy written in silence and precision. In her solitude, she smiled faintly, satisfied not with recognition, but with the certainty that her actions had mattered, that her preparation had saved lives. The desert, the mountain ridges, the isolated plains, these were her witnesses. The rifle in her hands was not a tool of fame, but a means to protect, to calculate, to execute perfectly when it mattered most. Somewhere far away, military planners would analyze her mission for years, drawing lessons, revising protocols, and training others to emulate her calm under pressure. Yet none could truly replicate it. Elena had achieved the impossible. One operator, one shot, saving millions without fanfare. And in Montana, under the endless sky, Elena Torres remained vigilant, disciplined, and ready. The world slept, unaware of the night she had changed history. Her legacy, invisible to most, was etched in the lives she had saved and the precision with which she had executed the impossible. The sniper had completed her mission. A warhead was neutralized. Millions were alive. History had been altered with one calculated, perfect shot. And Elena, ever vigilant, returned to the quiet solitude of preparation, knowing that her work, though unseen, would always matter.